Hey, everybody, this is Trags, Mike Petralia, joined as always by Richard Skinner, Skinny of Local 12, and this is the Jungle War Skinny Bengals postgame pod from Cleveland. Huntington Bank Field, the renamed Cleveland Browns Stadium. It was, of course, known for years as First Energy Stadium, but here at Huntington Bank Field, maybe it was the name change that finally got the Bengals a win here on the shores of Lake Erie. Who knows? They're not going to argue if that's what it took, Skinny.
I was going to say, Mike, you're 1-0 in Huntington Bank Field. Snapped a long losing streak, though, in Cleveland, in this particular stadium, no matter what the name was. And I think that's the overriding theme for this is snapping that losing streak is big. It's the first time Joe Burrow's won here. It's the first time Zach Taylor's won here. It gives them an AFC North win after they lost that earlier one to Baltimore. And yeah, these last 2 weeks have been ugly, but I also think they've been gritty. And I think there's something to be said about winning that way. Because let's not forget, when they were fun to watch and scoring 30-plus points for 3 weeks in a row, they won one game in that stretch. So, yeah, you'd like them to get back to that, and I think there'll be times that they will. I think some of it, again, had to do with Cleveland's defense today and certainly that Giants front last week. But I think there's something to be said about winning gritty because this is a league in which I think that's what separates teams. We've looked at Kansas City all year this year, right? I mean, they were undefeated going into today, and they're playing as we're doing this podcast at San Francisco. They haven't looked great at times, right? They haven't looked like the powerhouse Super Bowl champ. But you know what they've done? Every week they've played, they've won. So I think there's something to be said in this league of sometimes just finding ways to win, and that's what the Bengals have done the last couple of weeks.
The tone, without a question, Skinny, was set 12 seconds into the game when Charlie Jones takes the opening kick, takes advantage of a beautiful seam block by Drew Sample, cuts it up the middle, and then cuts over to the right sideline and makes it all the way down to the five-yard line, then toe taps and leaps at the pylon to complete the 100-yard gallop for a score. A critical moment for the Bengals in this stadium to be able to play with the lead. Skinny, do you know the last time they had the lead in Cleveland?
I heard this stat today. Was it? No, I don't think I did hear this. Was it 2020?
2019 was the last time the Bengals held a lead against the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland. And it was 3-0. It was back in 2019. They lost that game. I believe it was 26-18. But that's how rare it is for the Bengals to be actually playing with a lead in this building against this team, against this defense. And that was something that Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor both pointed to after the game. That kickoff was so important for so many reasons. And I just love the fact that after the game, Charlie Jones gave credit to Darren Simmons and Drew Sample for drawing the play up and then executing it the way they did.
Yeah, so we're the press box setup is Paul Dehner Jr. sat to my left today, and I was kind of catching up on getting a couple files set up, and he said, "Oh, this is an interesting kickoff return look," and I looked up and I said, "Oh, there's only one guy deep," and then I said, "Well, there's Drew Sample in front of him." I said, this will be interesting to see how this plays itself out. And lo and behold, it played itself out on the opening kickoff. And you described it perfectly of really it was Drew Sample. It wasn't a huge block. He didn't pancake a guy, but he's the guy that really sprung it into the big play. And then Charlie Jones did the rest. But that alignment, I think, was an interesting one to see. It was certainly a new one to see. And it worked to perfection the first time you tried it out there.
Well, I'll tell you what I loved about the block. Sample allowed Tony Brown II to come into him, lock him up. And then once he had Tony Brown, he didn't really essentially let go. And he didn't turn his body, he didn't hold him, but he held the block, if you know what I mean, in football terms, coach speak. He held the block, and he didn't let him get anywhere. And just for half a second, that's all it took for Sample to hold that block, make sure that Charlie Jones was behind him and then past him. And they talked about that when they ran it in practice. It was nice to see execution on special teams when the Bengals needed it.
Yeah. And Mike, to your point of why it was so important, without that kickoff return, they're down 6-0 at halftime instead of up 7-6. I mean, they never trailed in the football game. When they scored the Chubb touchdown to make it 7-6 and had a chance to kick for the tie, it felt very much like, Where's this game heading? And it even still felt a little bit like that at 7-6. But imagine what it would have felt like at 6-0 down at that point in a place where you always struggled. And then
it would have been
in the
the
second
same
half,
old story.
it would have been the same old story, right? And I think you'd have played with a lot more pressure if you're the Bengals. Instead, in the second half, they get the big fourth down stop. Joe Burrow throws a couple of touchdown passes, and lo and behold, 7-6 becomes 21-6, and essentially it's game over. Even though the final margin becomes just 7 points, but that's what that kickoff return did. It allowed you to, unfortunately, spin your wheels on offense in the first half and still have the lead at halftime, and that was big.
I will say spin your wheels. Joe Burrow, 8 of 15 in the first half, 81 yards. He was sacked 3 times, none of them, by the way, by Myles Garrett. He had a long pass play of 21 yards. The Bengals in the first half, and I'm looking this up right now, 81 plus 22, that's 103 yards of total offense in that first half.
Actually less, because Burrow got sacked 3 times too, Mike.
And he lost 17 yards. So, 86 yards of total offense.
Yeah,
I'm doing it right. Yeah, there it is, 86.
Yeah, brutal. I mean, it really was brutal. Struggle to convert third downs into first downs, struggle to get the running game going, didn't run it very much. The offensive line, I thought, held up well at times, and Joe couldn't find a receiver. And so, that touchdown return, just in the way the defense played, combined with, let's face it, this is not a very good offense, Cleveland, and it's proven it all season long. But again, it allowed you to play with the lead and start the second half with the lead, and that's monumental in my opinion.
I thought Dustin Hopkins really helped the Bengals today.
He sure did.
Missing the 49-yard field goal in the first half that I believe would have made it 7-3. Missing the extra point that toward the end of the first half that would have tied the game. Look, I know it's just 1 point, but to go into halftime still with the lead, still to say, you look up at the scoreboard and say, for as badly as our offense has played, as a team, we're still leading this game by 1 point. To me, that's a big deal.
And that goes back to, kind of showing the grit that you needed to show. The defense really did that in the first half. Actually, they did it the whole game, to be quite honest with you. And it's back-to-back weeks that they've done this. And I think it feels like it's getting a confidence boost, even though, listen, again, these two offenses are not very good, but they still, I think, went above and beyond. I mean, they did what you're supposed to do to a bad offense, not let them out, not let them breathe. And they really never did that either of the last 2 weeks. And again, at some point, this offense will get rolling again. If the defense can continue to do this, and I don't expect them to hold Baltimore to 7 or 14 points the next time they play them on the road, but can you keep it somewhere in the 20s that keeps your offense in the game? I think it's trending towards it can, although it's weeks off. That could be tons of injuries between now and then, whatever. But I think it's showing that it can do that, and it's getting the confidence boost that it can do that too.
He is Skinny, Richard Skinner of Local 12. My name is Mike Petralia, and you're listening and watching, if you will, one or the other, to the Jungle Roar Skinny Bengals postgame pod following a 21-14 Bengals win here in Cleveland. All right, you mentioned the injuries. We have to get to this. First, one significant one in each half. Toward the end of the first half, in the second quarter, Orlando Brown Jr. goes down with a right knee injury. It looked like he got twisted a little bit in the pile around Joe Burrow as he fell to the ground. He came off wobbly. He spent a long time in the medical tent, then made his way slowly to the locker room just prior to halftime. And Cody Ford came in and did a reasonably good job, I thought. I mean, I'm no offensive line coach, but I thought, I didn't see the Browns and their very formidable pass rush killing Cody Ford.
No, and he was the left tackle for the 2 touchdown drives in the second half. Whether that's just coincidental or not, I don't know, but he was the left tackle, and he was a part of those 2 drives to get touchdowns. So he had to do a reasonable job because it is a really good pass rush. And you could tell they really helped him as much as possible. They put Zach Moss to the left of Joe Burrow a lot in pass protection to help with the left tackle. But that's fine. I mean, you have to adjust to some of that. And even Joe, I think, said at the end of the game, it doesn't matter who's playing left tackle, you're probably going to chip on that guy anyway. And that's probably true. I think it was more exaggerated with Moss, really staying in the block and not just chipping. But Cody Ford was the left tackle on those 2 touchdown drives. And so, he was a positive on those drives.
And when you talk about after the game with Zach Taylor and talk about the situation with Orlando Brown Jr., he said The fact that he did return to the sideline and was in full uniform in the second half, probably a good sign going forward that it's not as serious. We're not talking weeks and weeks and weeks. We'll obviously play it by ear with that. Everything could change when they report on Monday. But the other big injury we need to make note of is Geno Stone. He collided pretty violently with Von Bell on a Jameis Winston pass toward the very end of the game, just before the Browns scored their final touchdown of the game. David Njoku caught a great pass in the back, or made a great catch in the back of the end zone. But right before that, it was Bell and Geno Stone colliding. Bell was on the ground for a while, but he got up. Geno Stone did not. He sat up in the cart and had to be carted off the field. Eventually, when he got back to us as the game was ending, the good news was the brace or whatever appliance they put on that lower left leg was gone. And he was able to get up on his own, limp into the Bengals locker room, but he did limp on his own power into the Bengals locker room. There seemed to be a wrap below his left knee. But again, after the game, Zach Taylor said, maybe it's not as bad as we thought, and that's a good sign. But again, very early here in a couple hours after the game.
Yeah, that answer surprised me when I asked it, and because you guys had all gone downstairs, I was still finishing my game story, so I'm kind of watching it from a different perspective. And to your point, as they're carting him off, I could see that contraption on his left leg, and when you see something like that, you would automatically assume the worst. Something major knee, broken bone, something along those lines.
Right.
And to Zach's answer, it took me by surprise. And we saw Geno Stone in the locker room. He had like an ace bandage with probably some ice. I'm assuming it was a big ace bandage down around that left knee, left shin area. But yeah, he was at least walking on his own power. And that was surprising based on, again, what I'm watching a guy get carted off with a contraption on his leg, right? You think the worst, and maybe it's not. Hopefully it's not for him or for them.
They really, I mean, they're not that deep in the secondary.
No, especially there.
If they're going to have to put Jordan Battle in the game at that position, that might be we might see some Tyson Anderson. We might see the Bengals get really crazy and really creative back there. Deshaun Anthony, obviously, is a possibility if Geno Stone has to miss some time coming up. And he's at least been tight, certainly Deshaun Anthony is somebody who's much more likely to fill in and has filled in than Tyson Anderson at this point, I would assume.
Yeah, I think Tyson still in their mind is more of a special teams guy. It is a luxury to some degree. Most teams only keep 4 safeties. The Bengals have a 5th because Tyson is such a good special teams player. So, I don't think you'd have to do a ton of roster machinations to make this work. It would put Tyson more in line to get some snaps if an injury were to occur. But, I mean, again, I'm not going to speculate by any stretch of the imagination. I just can't imagine a guy has something like that and is able to play the following week. But maybe he can. And, again, maybe they dodged a bullet.
Yeah, you never know. So we'll get that update from Zach and his coaching staff on Monday when we're back in Cincinnati. How about Sam Hubbard? Did you know he was playing with a broken pinky on his right hand?
Dude, the guy's incredible. I mean, he played with a hamstring injury that apparently he suffered in training camp. We didn't know it was a hamstring at the time. We knew he got hurt towards the end of camp, and come to find out after his struggles early in the season, and especially how bad he performed and looked in that Washington game. And I think you and I and a couple other people talked to him the week after, and he didn't make excuses. He said, I don't want to talk about injuries. And since that time, some more time has elapsed. And the last couple of weeks, especially, he's popped at times, and comes up with the interception today. Was in the backfield a few times today. And I think you're seeing the Sam Hubbard that that consistent force that's going to be in the right place, right time, occasionally make a play. I don't ever consider him a big playmaker, but I also don't consider him a liability by any stretch, but he was a liability in the Washington game. There's a guy playing with a hamstring injury because they needed him. Talked about early in the year because of the lack of depth. He and Trey Hendrickson were having to play 75-80% of defensive snaps. And Sam's talking about, we're just trying to survive from play to play, let alone go try to make a play. But they did it because they were asked to do it. And I think it tells you all you need to know about that guy as a professional football player.
I want to go back to the first half and finish up something. A significant injury happened, and it was obviously Deshaun Watson suffering a game ending. Certainly, we don't know, season ending could be Achilles injury. And in comes Dorian Thompson-Robinson. The very first snap, he throws a pass towards the end zone, and DJ Turner is in coverage. Did you think it was pass interference that set the Browns up at the? No, I didn't either. But
I thought the one last week at Washington was. He didn't think it was, which is fine. That's his opinion. It was called, and I thought that one definitively was. He didn't have his head turned. He ran through the receiver. This one they were doing a little bit of hand fighting, but if anything, I thought he got pulled into the receiver by the receiver, for goodness sakes.
What I thought. So, that's what I saw in replay. But
it was just weird flag. I mean, the flag kind of came out late. It kind of came out half-hearted. It's like the official on that side was like, yeah, I don't really want to make this call, but yeah, I mean, I'll make it anyway. And that's literally what it felt like. And that set up the Browns' first touchdown, the Nick Chubb run.
Well, and I'll tell you, it was bizarre because, not every fan inside a stadium at any time at any game is always classy. And you heard some cheers as the cart came out for Deshaun. Yes. And it's just an ugly part of the business that we're in, pro sports. Fans get bitter. Fans, feel that Deshaun, and somewhat rightfully so, but feel that Deshaun Watson has embarrassed the Browns franchise, and that's their way of showing it. You could feel, and Ben Baby was sitting next to me, and he said to me, and James Rapine, he said, you could feel an energy changing, and I agreed with him. I thought when Thompson Robinson came into the game, there was like this, oh boy, now we've got a shot of a bolt of energy. And then right before halftime, Burrow makes, I thought, a brilliant pass down the left sideline. And I thought Jamar Chase was grabbed. I thought that was interference.
I did too.
The flag was thrown, and they decided to pick it up because it was not catchable. Your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, no, I thought that was interference clearly too. I do want to go back to the cheering, if you will, when Deshaun got hurt. I get fans' frustration. I do, and he's based on his checkered past. He's certainly not a good guy by any stretch of the imagination. I just don't know where there's a place for that for anybody to do that. I just don't get it. Myles Garrett. I don't have the quotes in front of me, but after the game, he apparently went off on the situation and voiced his opinion and voiced it pretty loudly about how much he was disappointed in that. And I would agree with that. Listen, the Browns brought all of this on themselves. Deshaun certainly brought the heat on himself as well. But do we really cheer when somebody gets hurt? Are we really there?
No, is the answer. Short answer is no.
That felt weak.
You don't.
Yeah, that felt weak. Yeah.
All right, go to the second half. Fast forward to the second half, and I thought and I asked Zach about this after the game. Turning point to me was you make the stop on DTR, 4th and 2. He scrambles back. The Bengals break through, get pressure on Thompson Robinson. He throws incomplete on 4th down. The Bengals take the ball right there at the their own 35 and march the length of the field, capped off by the 18-yard touchdown pass to Jamar Chase from Joe Burrow. To me, that turned the game right there.
Yeah, and they did it so quick. I mean, it was the 4th down stop, and then the 22-yard Chase Brown run, and then a 19-yard catch and run by Zach Moss. And you look up, and it only took them 5 plays to cover those 65 yards. And at that point, with a backup quarterback in the game that they hadn't done much all day, to have a full 1-score lead plus, if you will, where it was going to have to be a touchdown and a 2-pointer at that point, felt big. Then they get the interception by Hubbard, but don't do anything with it, but force a punt. And then the next series, they do go 50 yards in 4 plays. And at 21-6, that felt totally monumental. But it doesn't start without the 4th down stop and then the quick drive for the touchdown right after it, no doubt.
Yeah, and that was, to me, one of those moments where you look up and you go, the defense is not just making big plays in terms of turnovers, they're getting stops and they're bearing down when they absolutely have to. And this is 4th and 2. And if there's one thing you can say about the Cleveland Browns, they've been able to use Nick Chubb as a weapon against the Bengals. Nick Chubb in his return today, 11 carries, 22 yards, just 2.0 yards per carry. Obviously, he's coming back off a knee injury, and they're going to pace him. But I thought that was a big statistic in the game as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I chalked that up to Russ because I can't remember a run that Nick had where you're like, well, man, he didn't finish off that guy like he normally does, or he didn't side. There was no place to go. And so I think that's a credit to the Bengals rush defense. And now, again, Mike, we can't take away the Derrick Henry 51-yard run. And Chuba Hubbard did have some big chunk runs in the Carolina game. But you start with the Washington game, this run defense has played actually it's been significantly better than it was, and actually played very well against teams that want to run the football. The Giants wanted to run the football. Cleveland wanted to run the football. To your point, I don't think Nick Chubb was ever going to get 18 to 20 carries, even if he had been efficient. I was probably going to be in the 11 to 15 maximum range, and he really didn't have any efficient runs. The Bengals really did a good job of not allowing him to get the head of steam, to find the cutback lane that he's so good against. So I know people are going to go, first game back rust. I'm sure there was some, right? I mean, there was some. But for the most part, he didn't have anywhere to go.
What else are you working on, Skinny? What were your takeaways? Other takeaways maybe we haven't touched on here post-game from the locker room.
Yeah, the column I'm writing about is just how important it is to win gritty. Again, would you like this team to not have nice, tidy 31-17 wins every week where Joe's looking good and you run it when you want to run it and you're scoring 30-plus points and the defense is holding people? It doesn't happen like that in this league. It just doesn't. It would have been nice to find a way, if you're the Bengals, to beat Baltimore 41-38 instead of the other way around, right? It would have been, nice to have Harrison Butker miss a field goal and hold off Kansas City, but you didn't. In these two games, your offense scuffled at times. It did enough, and your defense played well. There is going to be a game, it could be this week with Philly for all we know, where the defense plays well and still gives up 24 points, and the offense then goes and does its job now, and it's 27. That's the complementary football part on days. And you see it in baseball, right, Mike? It's the day where you don't hit, you pitch well, and the day you don't pitch well, you hit. And it's the vice versa of that, of, man, this team just can't find it. Days it hits, it doesn't pitch. Days it pitches, it doesn't hit. Well, for this team, it was, for a while, this offense is clicking, the defense isn't. Well, now the defense is clicking, the offense is just clicking enough, and I still think we know it's good enough when it has to be to go win games 30-27, 31-28, whatever it can be. And the defense will just have to be good enough that day, not like they've been right now, the way they should have been against two bad teams.
I just thought it was the happiest and most relieved I've felt that locker room all season long.
I do too.
And forget the ear blasting music aside, and the difficulty of doing post-game interviews aside. Yes, I'm bitching and moaning here, and that's inside baseball, but it's hard to do a locker room interview with about 110 decibels behind you, Skinny.
Well, and then when you go back to transcribe it, you hear mostly that, and you don't hear the question that was asked nor the answer that was given. It's like, well, what was my reason for? I got nothing out of this. I got enough out of it, but to your point, it was a lot.
Yeah, I just want to give our audience a little bit of a taste of what was going on. You had the music blaring, and God bless Dan Horde. He was doing his Bengals pod interview and for the radio network
with Charlie Jones.
Charlie Jones had his head down the whole time, and Dan was doing his best to get every single word into his ear so he could hear the question through the music and through the noise. And I went up to Dan afterward and I said, "That's a hell of a job. That is well done, my friend."
I just hope the recording wasn't drowned out by the music, because where Charlie's locker was basically right across from where the giant speaker that was blaring that music was. Because I got in for a little bit of that interview myself, and all I could do was stick a microphone in there and hope it got picked up somehow while our cameraman shot it. And Dan was literally, to your point, he had his phone, which he was recording on, or whatever his recording device, right by his mouth. So I'm just hoping that it wasn't drowned out by music, because he worked really hard to get that interview done.
I just admire that. You and me both have a special appreciation of what it takes after a winning locker room, after a team wins a game and the locker room is what it was. But that's good news for Bengal fans. Bengals finally get the win in Cleveland, 21-14. They're now one win away from 500. They're 3-4 on the season. They have Saquon Barkley and the Philadelphia Eagles coming to Paycor Stadium next Sunday afternoon. It's been moved. It's no longer the 4:25 on Fox. It is now a 1 p.m. game on Fox. So the whiteout won't have the full effect that I think the Bengals officials were hoping for, but we'll have you covered throughout the week, Skinny and I both. Skinny on local12.com and me on the Jungle Roar pod, as well as, of course, clnscincy.com. He is Richard Skinner. Skinny, my name is Mike Petralia Trags, and this has been the Jungle Roar Skinny Bengals postgame pod. The final again here from Cleveland, the Bengals 21 and the Browns 14. Until next week, take care.